Good morning, Sunnyvale. Let's see if we're actually streaming. Yeah, looks like we are. Welcome. Welcome back to Friday. We'll get started in just a few moments. Thanks for being here this morning. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat. Yeah, but we're back on Friday after last week's Saturday session. Definitely I had lots of pings from people, where are you on Friday? So definitely, if you ever have any questions, you can always, take a look at my Facebook page, or because I always put prior to that actual date and time, I create an event, but also on my mayor's page, LarryKlein.com, you can always see my calendar, and it shows when my live stream is, when my weekly office hours are, and all of that. But happy to be back. This week's early artwork is another piece of art from another mural from my trip to DC last week. I thought it was very colorful and really good from that standpoint. But definitely, I saw, while I was there, took a chance to see any, artwork that I could, visit some of the memorials in the mall, and of course, look for whatever murals I might see as I go around the city. So it was actually good from that standpoint to get out of the conference early morning and go for a run. That's always one of the things I always try to do whenever I end up going to whatever city it is. So it was good from that standpoint. But let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thank you for joining me again this week. This is the 149th installment of my weekly office hours. I hope everyone is doing well, staying healthy this week. We've now reached 1,047 days since the March 16th, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. Almost 3 years ago now, I converted my weekly coffee shop office hours into this weekly live stream address. And until my surgery a few months ago, hadn't missed a week. But people still say they appreciate hearing from their mayor each week, whether or not they're watching it live or watching this video delayed. This week, these weekly addresses really, allow me to, give input to and do outreach to a lot more people than I could just from an in-person office hours on a weekly basis. I'm able to give you some updates on what's happening around the city, answer some of your questions, and just provide some general words of encouragement. So thanks for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale. Most Fridays, I try to follow up this live stream address with in-person meetings on Murphy Avenue. Won't be able to do it this week, but I'll be back next week. But if you'd like to reserve a 15 or 30-minute time slot, just email me, and I'm sure we can make something work out. Let's go ahead and talk about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. Last Monday was Martin Luther King Day, so city offices were closed. There were multiple Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. events around the Bay Area. I attended the African American Community Service Agency lunch with lots of other people. It was actually good to be back in person attending that lunch, but actually, and then last week while I was in DC, I also visited the Martin Luther King Memorial, which is an amazing site. If you're ever in DC, definitely. It's one of the inspiring pieces of art that's there. So it was well timed to be able to visit the MLK Memorial right after MLK Day. And then on Monday night of last week, I took a red eye to Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And it was a very busy week for me. The conference was usually from 7:30 in the morning to about 6 p.m. at night. And then I would go to reception or dinner. And then often I would go back to the hotel room to attend meetings here that were starting at 7 p.m. here, 10 p.m. on the East Coast, and joining up virtually for those meetings. So it was a very busy week. I'll talk a little bit more about the conference later. Last Tuesday evening, we had a community outreach meeting to take comment for the Moffett Park Specific Plan Environmental Impact Report. And so thanks to everyone who attended and gave input. The breakout rooms were very interesting. I was there also, so that was one of the several meetings that I attended remotely from the East Coast. But this is part of the process. There'll be so the environmental impact report, the Moffett Park Specific Plan draft was released. So that is online if people want to take a look at it. MoffittParkSP.com, and then you can go take a look at and give comments if you have any comments about things that you think the environmental impact report should be covering. And then, so that was Tuesday evening. On Wednesday evening, there was an outreach meeting for options for alignment for the Stevens Creek Trail between Remington and Fremont Avenue. And, there are several options on whether or not the trail, when it reaches Fremont, goes on the east side or the west side, and where it does cross, where it crosses under 85 there. But in 2016, council gave direction to take the trail on both sides of 85, although this was part of that getting input from residents on the path on where it comes out onto Fremont, how you would get to the south side of Fremont. So there are lots of good comments coming from residents as far as that's concerned. If you missed that, it is on YouTube. So the Sunnyvale City Hall YouTube channel has all of our videos from our commissions and board meetings to council meetings to outreach meetings like that. So definitely, if you get a chance, go back and watch it. Ultimately, the design would be completing at the end of the year, and then when permitting would happen over the next year, and then construction would start sometime in 2025. So the plan, after the community outreach, the plan goes to the Bicycle Pedestrian Advocacy Commission next month, and then we'll come to council the month after or so. So still lots of time to give input as far as that's concerned. Last Thursday, Air Force One landed in Moffett Field. And so President Biden was here for a tour of all the storm damage that Governor Newsom was there to meet him for. So he was in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Ultimately, I think, Anna Eshoo was there to meet him on the tarmac. But from a issue standpoint, the storms have brought a lot of destruction to the Bay Area, California overall. And so ultimately, it was good that the president was here to highlight what recovery relief that the federal government will be providing some of the local jurisdictions. So, for us, we didn't have a state of emergency. There are several cities not too far away, Saratoga, Los Gatos, that ended up raising a state of emergency because of the number of downed trees and potential mudslides and all that. But we weathered the storm as well as possible. Could be always things that could have been improved, but in general, we didn't have that many issues. And then and then Friday, I flew back from DC after a very busy 4 days. So let me give you a quick overview of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And this was the first time I went to the January version of this. There's several big conferences, and you have the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, and the California League of Cities that hold conferences to bring council members and mayors together, city staff, city managers, city attorneys, depending upon what focus a specific conference may have. But this is the first time I was there for the January Conference of Mayors, and it was amazing in my mind, so of course I met with our state representatives. It's always good to our federal representatives. It's always good to advocate with them one-on-one, and not that they don't make it here, but it's also important to meet their DC staff, because that's one of the things that is critical, is trying to figure out ways to get grant funding, to figure out our priorities are followed at the federal level, and making sure that we get the representation that we need for our city. So I met with Senator Padilla's staff, I met with Congressman Khanna and his staff. So it was good and that was the free morning that I had before the conference started Tuesday afternoon. But we also, for the conference itself, we had a majority of the secretaries come and speak to us. So, the Secretary of Commerce, Finance, Transportation, Energy, Agriculture, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, even Senator Bernie Sanders was there. But it was pretty good conference as far as finding out what funding is available for a lot of different things. I found a $200,000 energy grant that's all based upon population, that's immediately available. So it's all formula based. Some of these are competitive depending upon what your application process is, and it's always better to be shovel ready. But this was just formula based, meaning based upon your population, this is how much money is available to your city. And so it was $200,000 that we had, and another month or two to apply for. That if I hadn't gone, we might not have found out about. So just in itself, that trip was worthwhile as far as that. Lots of other grant opportunities and all that, but from the Energy Community Block Grant, I was overjoyed to find out that here's money that's waiting for us to just apply for it. So we'll see what program we want to adopt that for, but between EV charging, solar panels, electric heat pumps, induction stoves, there's lots of things that we could be doing within the city with that additional funding. But overall, it was fantastic to just meet other mayors from around the country. This is one of the good positive things about the Bloomberg Harvard mayor being chosen as a Bloomberg Harvard mayor last year. There was at least half the class of our 40, even even one of the international mayors was there visiting as a guest speaker. So it was good from that standpoint to see some of my classmates from Bloomberg Harvard. I hadn't seen them in person since last June. We meet almost monthly for virtual meetings, but it was actually good to see some of them and talk to some of them in person for the first time in a long time. Then last weekend, Friends of the Sunnyvale Library had their every other month or so book sale. I heard it was very busy, lots of happy people there. And then on Saturday, Bober US, a new boba tea place opened up on Washington and Francis, right in the old Starbucks location. I've heard lots of good things about it for people who've already enjoyed it. So definitely give them a try. So Bober USA. So it's boba tea. And they have other soft drinks also, but definitely give them a try right there, just south of the Caltrain station. And then last weekend, of course, the 49ers eked out a win over the Cowboys. And so they will be moving to the NFC finals. So 49ers will be facing the Eagles, and the Bengals will be facing the Chiefs. So lots of football happening this Sunday. And then last weekend, it was also the lots of Lunar New Year celebrations. And those will continue on to this weekend, but happy Year of the Rabbit to those who are celebrating. Lots of good celebrations I heard about happening around the Bay Area. And so if you're celebrating, I wish you a healthy and happy and prosperous new year. On Tuesday, council had a meeting and we had several things. We first took public comment on our study issues and budget issues proposals. It was mainly to hear additional ideas and some ranking advocacy from our residents. But ultimately, we council proposed a certain number of new study issues. So staff has a few weeks, about almost a month, to write up all those proposals when we'll be ranking the study issues and the budget proposals next month in February. We looked at approving the Nexus study to changing the housing impact fee on non-residential development. So for every office building, for all retail, for every hotel that's built within the city, ultimately, we take a certain amount of housing mitigation fees. And so for us, this is always a big thing because, when redevelopment was kind of dissolved, it became an issue as far as where do we get money to help fund affordable housing. And so one of the things that council did back in the 80s was start this housing mitigation fee. And so in order for us to increase that, and we gave this direction over a year ago to look at increasing those fees, and we go through a whole Nexus study to change, to look at what other cities are doing, what the bring the stakeholders in, look at what the ultimate effects of that would be if we raise that fee to raise that fee, and how it would affect, would it stop office space? What's the right fee? If you set it at $100 a square foot, no office space would be built, and you wouldn't have any housing mitigation fees to then apply to affordable housing. And so it's this kind of, how high do you make it so that you get enough money to do something with, as opposed to if you make it too high, nothing gets built, and so you have no funding. And so we definitely did an increase over what it used to be, basically trying to increase the fees for $15 for under the 15 for the first 15,000 square feet, and then $22. That doesn't sound right. 1 second. There we go. Yeah, it's been a while since. It's only been Tuesday night, but definitely it was a long week, to say the least, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But we increased our fees for office and R&D to $11 a square foot for the first 25,000 square feet, and $22 a square foot for all the remaining square feet. So, and we didn't make any changes as far as retail, hotel, industrial uses, as far as what we would charge them. Ultimately, I think it's been fairly positive. We see, retail coming into the city, although not lots of net new square footage of retail, but we are seeing lots of new hotels coming here. And, you want a vibrant economy. You also want to make sure that you have money for funding affordable housing wherever you can. So lots of things happening as far as that's concerned. And then we also approved our community and neighborhood grant proposals for 2023. So these are grants that we give to different neighborhoods, to different organizations to run either neighborhood level events. So like block parties and, different, block parties or potlucks, bounce houses and all that's to build community at the local level, or community events like Art and Wine, the summer series, the tree lighting. So from what the Downtown Association does, what the Chamber does, to bring people into the city, or just bring a large portion of the city together. So it's always good to be able to give out those funds. And then Wednesday night, there was a sustainable speaker series. So our first one of the year, and it was Dr. Sarah Tabor, who's a crop scientist and food safety consultant. And so she shared knowledge on the farm sector and the agricultural industry. That was all online. Some, it used to be in person, but that was online. If you didn't get a chance to attend, you can find it online on the city website. And then yesterday was our all-day strategic session. So it's a long day. It's the first of 3 all-day meetings that we have from a council standpoint. The morning, if you ever want to know all the things, the city is doing and how busy our city staff is, take a look at the morning session, because we started at 8:30 in the morning, and for about 3 hours, we had an overview of city operations, where staffing is, where the budget currently stands, and then all the different projects and study issues that the city currently has underway. So it's actually really good from that standpoint. And then in the afternoon, we focused, and this is a little bit of the mayor's prerogative, on several important topics. And so we focused on economic development and how we support small and medium-sized businesses, how we make it vibrant from that standpoint. What are their barriers from expanding in the city? How can we attract them more to make them more successful? We talked about the enhanced recycled water program. So one of the things that being a Bloomberg Harvard mayor allows us to do is apply for an innovation project. And so a Tiger team of staff is currently looking at recycled water. It's a precious resource in our droughts that we're continually in here in California. And it's what we can do to utilize this precious resource better within the city. So, from our standpoint, council was very supportive of expanding recycled water usage within the city, and that's part of that program. It also allows us to conceivably plant more street trees and conceivably water them with recycled water. So all those are positives from that standpoint. And then the third topic for the afternoon was services for unhoused individuals. And there's been an opportunity to conceivably create transitional housing within the city. So we've had one developer come and say, they've done some preliminary designs and would be giving us funding to build this on city land. So, we have the year-round shelter, but that's run by the county. We have no control of who gets referred to that. Basically that shelter, unhoused from around the county, are able to be placed there. We have families and all that, but what we're looking for is trying to do something conceivably on city property. But council was generally in favor of doing whatever we can, and within reason, of course. It's like we can't house all the unhoused and then stop city services. So stop picking up the trash and stop paving the streets. But there is a balance there in trying to figure out. We've set aside $500,000 last year for outreach. So paying a service provider, paying Home First to do outreach into the community. One of the biggest thing that council said was we need a point contact within city staff that will deal with many of the unhoused issues. So working with Sunnyvale Community Services, Downtown Streets team, Helping Hands, Our Daily Bread, working with different service organizations that are working with the unhoused to try to build consensus, to try to figure out what response we need to do at different locations. So I was happy to see council, seeing that was a priority, the majority of council seeing that was a priority. And ultimately, we ended up updating our strategic priorities. So this was a list of 6 priorities, and we removed one, improved processes and services through use of technology. Not that that wasn't important, and not that we haven't, don't have a ways to go as far as that's concerned, but I think that was one of our strategic priorities that we added about 5 or 6 years ago. Internally within the departments, our IT department has done a fantastic job of modernizing many of our systems, our permitting systems, our budgeting system. So it's been positive from that standpoint. But ultimately, it was looking that we wanted to do, we wanted to add one, in 6 is a good number, better to be 5 strategic priorities, but we have 6. So we had to remove something. We ended up replacing that with supporting the unhoused community. And then one of my proposals was changing accelerating climate change to accelerating climate change and active transportation plan, and of course Vision Zero, which goes hand in hand with the active transportation plan. I think having a better active transportation plan is also really critical for climate action. There's lots, and we're currently updating our climate action playbook, our plays for the next 4 years, but it's making sure that we're setting aside the right focus to implement our active transportation plan. And we've made a lot of implementations over the last few years, lots of advocacy being done to get funding. And so those actually multiple projects that are being kicked off over the next year that I just got, updates that we finally have the funding for. So the funding had been a little slow coming through here, but so we made those changes, and then we maintained a lot of our old priorities. So the civic center modernization, and City Hall is close to being done, although we need to do we need to tear down all the other buildings and replace it with open space. We need to look at whether or not we'll be adding or updating the existing city library, the main library. Another priority, of course, is downtown Sunnyvale. Several people thought that we might be able to remove that from the list. The majority of council, along with myself, thought that it was critical to keep that on the list. The construction isn't complete. We haven't finalized the closure of Murphy Avenue to cars and making sure that it's a pedestrian zone. And then there's at least one block, the old Macy's parking lot, which still needs to be finalized on what's happening there. So we'll see where that goes, but it was important to keep the downtown Sunnyvale as one of our priorities. Equity, access, and inclusion is one of our priorities, which we added last year. And then, of course, the ability of infrastructure to support development and traffic, making sure that our roads, our sewer, our water are able to meet the needs as we continue to grow as a city. It's too many cities don't look at those problems until they're becoming a crisis. So it was a long day, but very productive. We finished around 5 p.m. So started at 8:30 in the morning and finished around 5 p.m. But happy to see council and staff together, happy that it's a good interchange of ideas, and it's a great team building experience as we have council. We have 3 new council members, and it's making sure that interaction with other council members as well as staff works out well. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly COVID numbers. The COVID numbers across the nation have continued to downtrend. From a national standpoint, we've now had 102 million cases. That's up about 300,000 just in the last week. Nationally, we've had 268 million people that have had at least one shot. That's about 81% of our population. We had about another 4,000 deaths in the last week. So we now had 1,103,000 deaths of people with COVID. As for California, things have stabilized. We finally passed 11 million positive cases. So 11,016,000 positive cases. But we still continue to have a decrease in our daily average. So we're now at 2,700 new cases a day. That's down from 4,000 last week, 5,700 the week before, 6,000 the week before that. So definitely things continue to trend downward. Test case positivity is now down to 5%. So things are looking good for COVID in general. It's not spreading, even though we're in the middle of winter months and it's cold and a lot of people are inside. We didn't see a big uptick post the holidays as we were expecting. So that's been positive. But we still have people passing away with COVID in California. We had another 300 deaths just in the last week. That brings our number to over 99,000 deaths here in California. And then from a county standpoint, we've had 469,000 cases. That's up about only 1,500 in the last week. We've had no additional deaths, so still at 2,622 deaths in the county. And vaccination, people are mainly vaccinated. More than 95% of those 18 and older are fully vaccinated, and over 70% of those that are eligible for the booster have already received it. So, I continue to do lots of advocacy for our city at the county level, at the state level, at the federal level, of course. I talk to our county supervisors, for testing. You can go to secfreetest.org to find out where you can still get tested, or go to secfreevax.org to find out. There's still certain locations around the county where you can go. There's the Mayview Health Center at Columbia Neighborhood has free shots, free boosters that are provided Wednesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. if you need to go. Let me get to some of our upcoming events this weekend. There are several things. Today, actually, this afternoon, Elephant Floor on El Camino. So this is on El Camino, just east of Wolf Avenue, Wolf Road. They will be having their grand opening. So that's happening at 3:30 p.m. this afternoon. And then on Sunday, of course, is the AFC NFC Championships. And I know multiple restaurants and bars that will be having watch parties if you want to join the fun. So that's happening this Sunday. And then as far as upcoming council meetings, it's been a busy month, but we still have one more workshop. We have a Moffett Park Specific Plan Community Benefits Workshop next Tuesday, the 31st. So you can join that online. And then on the following Tuesday, council will be meeting on February 7th, and several things on the agenda. First, we'll be declaring February as African American History Month. We'll be considering some updates on Murphy Avenue as far as considering a permanent closure of the 100 block, adopting a resolution to establish a pedestrian mall there, and then look at, while we're doing the implementation of that, potential implementation, continuing the temporary closure until things become more final. So that's one of the things that's on the agenda. And then, so if you want to speak about keeping Murphy Avenue closed, what you would like to see, any additions, definitely that's upcoming at the beginning of February, and then at the February 7th meeting. And then we'll also be looking at updating the temporary eastbound Tasman Lane closure and consider to extend that closure duration. We kicked off a study. The study won't be done until the end of the year. And for me, at least for as far as traffic levels, according to city staff, the eastbound portion of Tasman still isn't required to be opened, although from a funding standpoint, I think we dedicated funding to keep that going. I think that runs out in June. So that's one of the reasons why it has to come back to council to give further direction. And then the week after that, on Thursday, February 16th, we'll be having our study issue and budget workshop. So this is the second of our all-day meetings where council will be ranking the study issues. So all the different study issues that boards and commissions propose, that council proposed, will end up ranking those, and then city staff will go off and look at what the effects are on the budget, what staffing can take care of, what additional staffing might be needed. And then council comes back at our budget workshop, which is our third meeting for the year, our third all-day meeting, where we figure out whether or not we want to allot additional funds to any of the budget issues or any of the study issues or budget proposals that we are going to be reviewing. Let's go to our weekly questions. If you have a question, please add it to the chat. David asked, I watched the strategic workshop online. Why weren't you in person along with the rest of City Council? So yes, I almost made it 3 years without catching COVID. But I think I caught it actually on the red-eye flight from the San Francisco to DC. And finally on my third day or so in DC, I finally tested positive. Started feeling not great. I was still testing negative. And then when I came back immediately, it's like very positive, asymptomatic for who knows how long. I'm feeling okay now, but I still am testing positive. Luckily, we still have the ability to do remote meetings if we are sick, if something happens. That will ultimately change, possibly depending upon what state legislature happens. So happy to be able to take advantage of that, and happy to have the Vice Mayor Dean be able to run the meeting in my stead. So it was good to be able to join in, give my input, and sorry that I wasn't able to be there in person. Alex asked, with all the rain, is the city ending its drought restriction? So it's been a rainy winter, and the rains return this weekend, but we're not out of the drought yet. We are looking, as I said previously, at better utilizing our recycled water from our wastewater treatment plant. But the restrictions that we put in place last year are set to expire in June, and we'll reevaluate then whether or not we want to continue those restrictions for another year. You're watering 2 days out of the week, all that, but we'll be making that decision later this year. Frida asked, wondering if you have any insight in what is going into the old McDonald's building on El Camino at Bernardo. Yeah, so I still haven't found out what the name of it is, but city staff says it's planning to be an Indian restaurant. I know that they're working on the interior components of that restaurant, but there isn't a date yet on when that'll be opening. Allison asked, when I visited the courtyard, they were almost out of sand and sandbags. Has it been restocked? So yes, staff is closely monitoring the sand and sandbags at the smart station, especially during this rainy season. They posted something, don't discard your sandbags immediately. We're not done with the rain. And there's also, a process of where you can turn those sandbags back in. Don't just dump them into the garbage. But we've already given more than 3,000 sandbags out this season. Another 900 sandbags are ready to be issued to residents. And there's also piles of sand there and empty burlap bags. If they did run out, if you want to do self-service, the city purchased more than 60 cubic yards of sand for storm preparations this year. And good thing we planned ahead, because it has been a very stormy year as far as that's concerned. I don't see any other questions. So let me go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again this week. We still live in uncertain times and new issues. New problems come up almost every day. But I just want to thank you that no matter what challenges we face them together. I'm proud of Sunnyvale and how our residents have responded to the challenges over the last few years. I am grateful for everyone in our community that helps out, showing their generosity, showing their kindness. Your actions and your attitude really do make a difference. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together, and we will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, and of course, go Niners. Goodbye.